3d6 down the line.
All right. That is the end of the second Shadowdark session. Thanks again, Ted, for running that. That was very, very fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you, Ted.
I'm not a very experienced GM. I don't run a lot, and it's hard to live up to. This is not just flattery. It is really genuinely hard to live up to John's example.
But you do run a lot for the kids, right? So
for the kids, yeah, which is a very different sort of vibe. It's a bit like, you think we're bad. It's really herding cats when you play for kids. They can go all over the place, Like
now, you had mentioned that they were they thought outside the box in a certain area. What area was that?
So the Mecha Squagulot. I love this. All right, so one of the kids was looking at the equipment list and was like, "Oh, I can buy glue. I want glue." And I'm like, "Fine, you've got glue." So he's got glue in his backpack. And they get up to that curtain and they pull it down instead of opening it going through. And then the Mecha Squagulot appears on the other side. So they cover the curtain in glue and throw it on the robot and then just beat the tar out of it. They couldn't do anything.
That's great.
That's awesome.
They curb stomped that thing, man. It was great.
Good use of mundane equipment, man.
Yeah. But every time they came across a trap, they triggered it, man.
Yeah.
They just hit all of them.
John and I got sloppy right there at the end with the needle trap. That was we were so careful for everything else.
Yep. Yeah. That was me. Sometimes I just want to push forward. What was the potential trap for the step that we'd stepped over?
So if you had stepped on it, the whole staircase would have turned into a rapid escalator and thrown you up, and that hatch at the top would have dropped down, and all the holes were full of spikes, and you'd have just smacked into it.
Sweet.
And the first person on the stairs would take the most damage, and then succeeding people would take less.
I kind of wish we'd set that one off.
It would have been fun. I was hoping. I got the kids, but you guys got away from it. But so the thing I wanted to kind of talk about here was, in terms of dungeon design, you noticed this was fairly linear.
Yeah.
Which when you're designing for kids is kind of important. You need to give them meaningful actions and decisions to make. But you can't give them too much decision making. If you're trying to, we only have an hour to play and we only play twice a month or something. And, so I need to keep it tight, right? And I need to give them things to do, but not too many things to do.
Right.
So I was a little worried about how linear it would be for you guys.
Right.
And you noticed it by the time you got to the scales. You were like, there's nowhere to go. There has to be something here, kind of thing, because it's been a straight line so far. So on the other side, that's why I put the corridor going two directions. And so I was reading about Mercer dungeon theory and other things, and giving people meaningful choice. And, even in the Shadowdark book, it says, a choice of left or right and they're identical is not really a choice. It's just, flip a coin.
It's an illusion of choice.
It's an illusion of choice. So it was just left or right, but I tried to make the two different with the weird clacking sound one direction clearly meant something and the rot smell the other direction. And my thinking was that, you would decide which was more scary and not go that way. And in fact, you chose very well.
It was random, but yeah.
It was random. It was random. I know. No skill involved. So, maybe if I redesign this or play it again or something like that, I might have to rethink that section and try and telegraph a little differently or, set it up in some way that there's a real choice to be made there.
Right.
I put it, differences in, but now on reflection, I don't think it was a real enough choice.
I don't know, man. I wouldn't beat yourself up about that because like you said, it's made for a one shot and linear is okay in the one shot scenario because you're just setting the stage for a series of things that need to happen in order to move on. Right. And I will say that I thought that the problems that were positioned we're right about the level of difficulty where you're not getting frustrated,
Okay, good.
we could all tell that story of that one game that we were in where there was a puzzle involved and nobody could get past it. And we sat there with our fingers up our noses for like 3 hours. We all have that story. And it doesn't feel good. You know, it definitely doesn't feel good when that happens.
I was worried that the scales were going to be that. I understood how to solve the puzzle, but I was really worried that we just didn't have anything valuable left. You know what I mean? Thank God you had the Holy Symbol, you know?
I was starting to wonder myself. I sort of the description says that it needs to be something of importance to the PC, and I was trying to depict that in the reliefs. Right, the farmer gives a chicken, the rich man gives a jewel, the leather worker gives his tools, kind of thing.
Right.
So, but then I hadn't actually like double checked Mike's equipment list. Of course, it was his second character at that point, so I wasn't really sure what he had. I would have accepted, you know, his personal sword working better than the sword he found in the tunnel.
Right.
Kind of
okay. That makes sense. You know what, if you wanted to make that maybe more apparent, I don't know if your kids had a problem with that.
They haven't gotten to it yet.
You could put an actual inscription there where it's like, great sacrifice must be made to move forward, or like something like that. You know, you'll phrase it better than I would.
The path of advancement is lightened by sacrifice or something like that.
I actually liked like the whole visual thing of the relief, because that was like, might be a little bit tougher for children, but and it was actually tough for me too. Like you know, like the relief is a good signifier of like what you should be doing. You know, I like that you had like different strata of people. You know, like the farmer gives, you know, whatever's important to you. It seemed to work pretty well.
What was the significance of the dragon horn?
Yeah.
The option was to simply take that and leave, and it was extremely valuable. You could just be like, yoink, we're out of here. You
also,
know,
wouldn't have set off a trap if you had done it?
No trap. If you couldn't figure it out, you could just take the horn and leave.
Did it mean something to Armin's Squagulat?
It's from the Dragon Men battle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would its value be higher than what we were able to get from Armin's Squabulat? Did I say that right?
It's pronounced Radishman, Mike. Come on.
Radishman. I can't say that, dude.
So obviously Armin's Squagulat.
Speech impediments, man.
That's a good point. I had it placed actually quite high, but now that I think about it, I should probably reduce that. Yeah.
Only because
John got, I think, 900 gold pieces worth of gems.
Sweet.
Right. Which so you know, when you're doing advancement in Shadowrun, that's a lot. It's like
Shadowdark. I know.
Shadowdark. That's right.
So actually, I wanted to comment on that, which is that I wrote this for OSE. And while I went in and changed some of the, the monsters, for example, and rethought about how the traps are handled, I decided I was not going to adjust all my treasures, and I'd written it all out already, and I was not going to fix it. Yeah, but it's a one shot. If it had been a campaign thing, I would have fixed it. But for a one shot, I just wanted it to be, piles of loot. But yeah, I should adjust the value of that dragon horn. That's a good point. I like that.
I feel like the torch thing didn't happen, or didn't have any weight on the session. Did we forget about it again, or did we just?
It's because we lit new torches before
the other ones got new people came in and put up a new, like around 10:30, Mike's cleric started, and we quit playing at 11:30. So his light spell lasted an hour, and it ended up working for you guys really well. However, there were a couple of things that might have happened to put out torches.
Yeah.
I had some, so I had a wandering monster called a Roctopus that would have come out of the stones and tried to extinguish torches. And a few other spots where gusts of wind and things might put out a torch and things like that. So
I was thinking like maybe for one shots, just as I don't even know what the ramifications would be, but for something like really quick like this, maybe you reduce the timer to 30 minutes instead of an hour to put the pressure on.
I think it's called Blitz or something like that in the rules, where you change the light duration to half an hour. And I think now that I see how it worked, I think you're absolutely right, John. I probably should have done that.
I mean, I'm sure people have talked about this in incredible length online with the popularity of Shadowdark, but the thing, I understand like the appeal of the real-time torch, but I just feel like because there's so much that is abstracted and then focused on in these types of dungeon crawling games, it's like where you kind of zoom out and you're moving large distances in an abstract amount of time, but then you kind of zoom in on combat, and combat that in the in world would only take like 30 seconds takes like 15 minutes here. You know what I mean? Like there's just a disconnect there for me that just doesn't work for me. You know what I mean?
It's a disconnect, but I think that it's an average, right? Like, so yes, your 3-minute combat takes like 30 minutes in real life, but then the 400 feet that you just went down the dungeon tunnel takes like 30 seconds in real life. So I think it's just kind of a balance. And one thing that I will say that I do like about it is that it takes off the plate one more thing of tracking for the DM, in that
I like that.
You can basically abstract it. Like, you put a lot of work, John, in Arden Vool, being like, that was a turn, that was a turn, that was a turn, that was a turn. And that's great because it also helps motivate us and give us do we want to spend a turn doing X when we know that we are going to run out of turns at some point? And light really isn't our problem in Arden Vool, and it hasn't been for a long time. But
that's only because of continued light, though.
Yeah. But in here, I think also having no one have dark vision or infravision or whatever is maybe makes that a little bit more of an emphasis. And I really like that.
I forgot that none of the demi-humans have.
Nobody has it, right? Yeah. So there's no more guiding us out using his infravision while we're all like holding onto his shoulders kind of thing. Like, that's not a thing.
Right. Yeah.
So, and also like the other mechanism that I like in Shadowdark that's built in is, if you are in the dark, the instances of wandering encounters goes up through the roof. So that's like something else that I think might be a mitigating factor. I don't know. I think it's definitely, I don't know that one is necessarily better than the other, but I do like having that as a different mechanic that is available.
Yeah.
So, I will say that for me, not tracking turn after turn and just, letting the torch be, I've got a little clock on the corner of my screen. I was watching it, and I was happy with the way it was going. It was much easier for me. When I've tried to track turns and movements and things like that in OSE, I get into the story, I'm talking to and I'm not paying attention. Then I have to stop and think and go back. And
wait, so you don't track turns at all in this game?
You can. You can.
Yeah, it's. I didn't have any particular reason to be doing so.
Well, what about random encounters?
I was doing it sort of basically. If you guys spend some time doing a section, I do a random encounter in there. And when you get to the next section, I would do a random encounter in there, because it was roughly a turn between them in most cases. But you weren't spending a long time in any one spot. So I was just I was being a little bit zen about the whole thing, if you will, and kind of just doing it by section rather, because I'm not good at turn tracking.
Yeah, I agree with Ted on that. Like, it's not something that comes, like, I'm not a super detail oriented person when it comes to this kind of thing. Like, so for me, like, it just takes the onus off of that. I'm trying to remember when I did run that Wavestone Monolith, like, one shot adventure for us, there was a wandering encounter table. And it was pretty clear. I don't have it in front of me. And it was pretty clear how often you were to do that. And I can't remember what that is now. But it is definitely, wandering encounters are a thing. One thing I was going to wonder, though, is we do 2 breaks in our session. Do you stop that torch timer during your break? What if David runs off to make a poop and he's gone for 15 minutes? Is that like 15 minutes of torch time that's gone? Like, are we all pounding on the door being like, David, hurry up?
It's dark when he comes back, and there's a 6 in 6 chance of a wandering monster while he's pooping.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how that goes.
So I would probably advocate maybe stopping the timer for that, when that happens, but whatever.
I think it worked out all right. I'm not at all feeling bad about it.
No.
And it was fun for me to do it that way and try it out. I readily admit that one of the things certainly about OSE and old school roleplay in general is that tracking the turns is part of the economy of resources and, torches and time and food and rest and everything like that. It is part of what makes it fun. And I do need to be better about it.
Yeah, me too.
But I run for, 9-year-old kids. So I'm just trying to, make sure.
Yeah. You're not doing
for an hour at a time. Yeah. I'm just trying to keep it fun for everybody and make sure everyone at the table gets a chance to do something cool.
Yeah. Well, there is a reason why games evolved away from that level of bookkeeping. And I think that's because a lot of people find it challenging.
Yeah.
And I think that only some players find that like a fun aspect, right? And so when you watch like how like it evolved from AD&D, which is where I started. I mean, I did do basic, but only briefly, all the way through the editions. Like that stuff became systematically less and less and less important to the overall system. And also there were just a lot more workarounds like magically to get around that stuff. And that was very much a deliberate evolution there.
I think it's to its detriment though, frankly. I mean, I never questioned it when I was kind of growing up with it and moving through the editions, but it wasn't until I found the OSR, I was like, oh, this is the reason why this is like that.
Yeah.
And it's not like every role-playing game, of course, needs that. But for the type of game that D&D presents itself as through the editions, it's you need that kind of procedural aspect in order to keep the tension up. You know what I mean? Like, because it's always about with these kind of games, with this kind of dungeon crawling game, it's all about risk versus reward, right? It's always like do you push that little bit further to get that little bit extra, and you have to kind of weigh the options of whether or not that's worth it. And obviously in Shadowdark it's about the light. But I do think it's timekeeping is essential at least in the old way of playing, and like the dungeons in like the modern 5th edition, it's like there's no pressure, you know what I mean? There's just no, it's like you can just do whatever you want, and I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you raised an interesting point there, John, because it sort of thinking about that this fairly linear track of this particular dungeon, there isn't really anything to have to push. In Arden Vool, right? We're taking turns. We're going up and down. We're going through, like, should we take that corridor there and go into a whole new level? We might never get back. Like, we are taking real risks every time we make a choice between left and right.
Right.
And this one was much more linear. And so maybe that's why I didn't feel really compelled to trek the time, because there wasn't the same kind of risk.
No, of course not.
Your resources of time were not really at risk.
And that would have been the case even if it wasn't Shadowdark, I feel like, because it's just it's a short little dungeon. You designed it for children, so and it works fantastically that way. It's like when you remove the campaign aspect, like all that pressure sort of is relieved off, because in Arden Vool, you have to really think about every time you go left and right, because it could mean doom for your character. You got to think way ahead about getting the treasure back and safe havens and all that sort of stuff. And with this, it's like whatever. It's like I didn't even blink an eye anytime my guy died. I'm like, just roll up another one, like whatever.
Right. It's true. Yeah. It's true. The like sacrifice of Squeegee was much higher than the sacrifice of I can't remember his name.
What my guy's name was. Swiver. Yeah.
Swiver. Yeah.
But like that's the thing. Like with a one shot, resource management is not a factor.
Yeah.
Like, we started with 2 torches. Yeah. No, John and I each started with 2 torches with that backpack thing. That gives us 4 hours of light. Maybe maybe a mishap happens along the way type thing. And then but we're not playing a 3-4 hour session. So it's never was going to be a problem.
No, you're right.
And so I think that's just overall just maybe the difference between one shots and campaign setting, and that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. It's popcorn gaming. I
was kind of telling you guys this off screen too, but I'll just say it for the audience too. Not that the audience isn't fully aware of this as well, but it's like I kind of feel like with these one shots, like monetary treasure and the appeal of either converting that to XP or XP in general really doesn't mean that much. Right. It's like all about having fun in the moment for that short amount of time that you have together, oftentimes with strangers, if you're doing it at a convention or something like that. So I always think it behooves anyone who designs an adventure for a convention that's in the D&D mold to, instead of doing like monetary treasure and lots of monsters that'll cause you to level up or like that, it's all about like finding really cool, interesting stuff that you can apply if you use your brain a little bit, like right then and there within that little span of 4 hours or whatever you have to play the game.
Yeah. Well, you guys did miss the niche full of healing potions.
Oh,
that would have been nice.
That would have been nice.
Yeah.
No, that was really good advice. You gave that to me earlier this week, though, John, because I mean, Ted and I are running this game at GaryCon this year, and basically, like, what's that?
In theory.
Basically,
someone's got to sign up for it eventually.
Yeah, John you have to play if no one else signs up for my game. Basically, we're running the same dungeon, but Ted's doing it in OSC and I'm doing it in Shadowdark. So we're doing our own and I thought that was super useful information to basically don't worry about giving people money, give people like magic items that they can use. Maybe it doesn't have to be super powerful. It could be potions or like whatever.
It could be mundane items as long as they're interesting.
Grappling hook and a rope just sitting there might, hey, that's pretty cool. I'm glad I had that.
Yeah.
A pot of glue. Why is it there? Nobody knows.
I don't know. Do something cool with it, man.
I mean, cool stuff is like where like your traps, by the way, Ted, were like killer, like really cool and unique and interesting.
Good.
But it like a way to flesh out the interest in like a short little mod would be to make it hard to find but possible, but like the key items that would allow you to easily bypass those traps. You know what I mean? Where like when you find the item initially, it's like you don't really know that there's any use for it, but it's interesting enough that the people want to take it because they think it's important, and then they come across that one trap and they're like, oh, if we use this item, like we could probably, it's like an immense amount of satisfaction that comes from being able to implement something that you worked a little bit to find, that you didn't see a use for, and then all of a sudden you see the use for it. You're like, fuck, that's awesome, things like that.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's a good idea.
I think you got to dumb things down too for a convention. Half the time, people are running in, they're running up to the game at the last minute because they just finished like something else. And, they're probably eating a Snickers bar because they skipped lunch or, like all of those things. We've all done that. And sometimes it's like hard for people to get into the mode of then playing a game again.
For sure.
So anyway. Well, I booked all my things for Gary Con. I'm super excited.
I'm all booked. But actually, you make an interesting point, Mike, which is, so when I wrote this, I was trying to have it be a very kind of, grimdark kind of, I was trying to give the sense of the weight of the age, and the stones and the darkness and your torchlight just barely illuminating things. But then, of course, I stick in things like Mechasquagulot, which sort of,
not grimdark at all.
Not grimdark at all. But
kids love it.
Yeah, the kids love it. They absolutely love that thing. They thought it was great. You face the Mechasquagulot. They're like, oh my god! But I guess what I wanted to say was, it's interesting how the tone of a table can change based on who's there, on who's had lunch, who hasn't had lunch. On a couple of players get the giggles or whatever, or a GM who can't resist putting in something goofy like a robot goblin, and then as the tone changes to the silly, people will make very different decisions. Right. They're more likely to ride the lightning if they're feeling silly and giggly, that kind of thing, and they'll do something crazy, or if they're taking it all very seriously, they are more focused and they will. Maybe, just for example, you might have gotten the scales thing a little faster. Not that you were slow about it. You guys got it. It's fine. But like, you were just like, oh, I'm just going to throw crap in it and see what happens, and like, it might've been different is all I'm saying. And I just think that's interesting, the way the tone of a table changes and can affect your decision-making.
Oh yeah.
Like if we'd run into that thing before, Mecha Squad, whatever the thing was,
Jesus.
I would have been more hesitant to just randomly throw things in there, thinking that it could potentially set off some sort of deadly trap, right? Like if you put something that's totally useless in there, maybe the scales go the other way, and maybe like you hear like a grinding of ears, or the scent of something like acidic, or insects start coming out of the wall, something like that.
I was. One thing I wasn't going to do was take out that horn. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah,
I was paranoid enough not to screw with that.
Yeah. I like that. Low value items or waste, being frivolous causes the scales to reverse. Then what happens? Ooh,
yeah.
That'd be cool.
Like if Billy Bob takes a shit in a pan, then maybe like a demon is summoned or something.
By the way, I should say that the reliefs and the contents of the reliefs, that's a joint venture between me and Matt. We talked about that one.
Oh, nice.
So Matt gets some credit there for sure. I don't want to skip that. because he was there when they first encountered the Megasquaculot, and I told him the scales were beyond that, and we were talking about it, and I got some good ideas from him, so that's cool.
I guess that guy's okay.
He's all right.
Fine. I guess we'll keep him.
We'll let it go.
Goddamn new guy.
New guy with the good ideas. Whatever.